Vince Moretti was a man the city feared before they even knew his name. He moved like a shadow over streets soaked in blood and neon. His reputation whispered in back alleys, in boardrooms, and in prisons. Power was his language, fear his currency, loyalty his only law. Cross him, and the world would remind you quickly who held the knife. He had rules. Simple, deadly rules. No betrayal. No weakness. No distractions. No one got close enough to see the cracks in the armor. Or survive if they did. Family, business, enemies. All treated with exacting precision. And yet, in the quiet hours, alone in his office, surrounded by money, weapons, and secrets, Vince sometimes wondered if he could ever find someone who could survive him. Liana Kay had been watching him for months. Every move, every meeting, every shadow he passed through. She knew the danger, knew the kind of man Vince Moretti was. Trained to infiltrate, she had studied his routines, his habits, his weaknesses, and his rules. She was a ghost in his world, and yet, she had to walk into it, alive, pretending to belong. She never imagined that the first moment she would see him in person would make her pulse race in ways no training could fix. It was a winter night. Rain-slicked streets glimmered with neon, steam rising from manholes, horns blaring faintly in the distance. Liana's job was simple. Attend the gala, gain access to Vince, collect intelligence, report. Simple, dangerous, and deadly if she failed. She walked in, confident, calculated, but aware that one wrong step could mean death. Vince noticed immediately. Tall, commanding, radiating danger. He didn't move toward her yet. He observed. Rules dictated his life. Never trust, never underestimate, never show weakness. And yet, in the corner of the grand ballroom, there was something different. Vince, to himself, low and dangerous, she doesn't belong here. And yet she is here. Why? He was curious. That was rare for Vince Moretti. Curiosity usually led to scrutiny. Curiosity usually led to destruction. But this woman, she moved like she belonged. She smiled, laughed lightly, scanned the room with sharp eyes. Not naive. Not afraid. Dangerous. He recognized danger in a woman when he saw it. And this was no ordinary threat. When he finally approached, it wasn't with violence, it wasn't with charm. It was measured, deliberate. Every step precise, every gesture a warning. A glance that could cut or claim. Vince, calm, commanding, "You're far from home, aren't you?" Liana, controlled, hiding the tremor in her chest. Voice steady, perhaps. But sometimes the most dangerous places are the most interesting. It was brief. A brush of words, a glance of eyes. But the collision of their worlds was undeniable. He, a man whose life was built on fear and control. She, a woman whose life was built on deception and observation. And in that instant, both realized something fragile and dangerous had begun. Vince, lowering his voice, dangerous curiosity lacing his words. "You don't belong here. Yet you act as if you do. Tell me, are you brave? Or just foolish?" Liana, softly, keeping her guard, hiding fear with wit, maybe both. Sometimes they're indistinguishable. That was how it started. A meeting dictated by duty, observation, and survival. Yet beneath it all, a silent recognition passed between them. He saw her for what she was. Sharp, calculating, untouchable. She saw him for what he was. The most dangerous man she had ever encountered. Rules were made to survive. Loyalty to last, power to command. And yet, neither rule could prepare them for what was about to happen. Liana Kay was a professional. She did not get distracted. She did not fall. She did not let desire cloud her judgment. Every action she took was calculated, every word measured, every glance intentional. She had trained for this. Years of preparation, deception, and control had led her here. Her mission was clear. Infiltrate Vince Moretti's inner circle, gather intelligence, dismantle his operations, and expose him. Nothing more. Nothing less. Vince Moretti, the man of rules, of power, of fear, had never encountered someone like her. He had seen many try to charm him, manipulate him, and fail. Yet Liana moved with a precision he could not ignore. She laughed at the right moments, listened when necessary, and said nothing more than she needed to. Every motion was deliberate, every reaction measured. Vince, quietly intrigued, almost amused. "You are far too composed for this world. Tell me, are you pretending? Or are you really as untouchable as you seem?" Liana, cool, controlled, masking intent. "I observe. I adapt. I survive. Pretending is unnecessary when you know the rules." That was the truth. She survived because she understood the rules better than anyone. And for Vince, that made her more dangerous than any weapon he owned. He did not yet know why she fascinated him. But he felt it, a pull he could not explain, a challenge he had never faced before. Vince, leaning closer, voice low, probing, "You understand this world too well. That is unsettling. Most people crumble when they see me. You do not." Liana, steady, measured, voice unwavering. "Most people are predictable. I'm not. And I do not crumble." Every interaction between them was a chess game. She made moves that left him intrigued but unaware of her true intent. She laughed lightly at his jokes. She complimented his intelligence. She respected his power. And in every action, she subtly weakened his trust in those closest to him, gathering information, testing loyalty, and learning who could be manipulated. Vince, dangerous, curious, almost whispering, "You have a mind I cannot read. And I do not like not being able to see everything. How do you do it?" Liana, slightly teasing, still professional. "Perhaps you are not as predictable as your reputation suggests. Perhaps I simply pay attention." She was careful. Every word, every movement, every gesture was designed to draw him in without giving herself away. Her heart remained untouched. Her mission remained clear. Yet with every encounter, Vince's curiosity, obsession, and hunger to understand her grew. Liana began to subtly influence his inner circle. A suggestion here, a compliment there, a carefully timed observation. Nothing overt, nothing that could expose her, but enough to sow doubt, confusion, and loyalty shifts among his closest allies. Vince noticed patterns emerging, but he did not yet understand who was orchestrating them. Vince, pensive, muttering to himself, "There is someone moving against me. Quietly, cleverly, but who? And why do I feel drawn to watch them?" He was falling into her trap, unaware of the precision with which she had designed it. She had learned his schedule, his habits, his preferences. She knew where his loyalties were strongest, and where they were weakest. And she was using that knowledge to weaken his empire, one subtle move at a time. Vince, dangerously, almost a growl, still unaware of her true aim. "You are unlike anyone I've ever met. Most people fear me. Most people bow. What? You calculate. And yet you smile as if nothing matters." Liana, calm, unfazed, voice unwavering, "Smiles do not cost anything. Decisions, actions, those have a price." He did not yet know her heart was untouchable. He did not yet know she would not fall. He only knew he could not stop thinking about her. She was a puzzle he could not solve, a challenge he could not resist, and a presence he could not ignore. But she remained untouchable, smart, disciplined, a perfect agent of chaos and intelligence inside his world. Vince Moretti was dangerous, unyielding, a man who destroyed anyone who betrayed him. And yet Liana walked beside him, controlled, deliberate, untouchable. Every conversation, every laugh, every shared silence was part of her strategy. She was inside the lion's den, and the lion did not even know the trap that was forming around him. Liana K. moved deeper into Vince Moretti's world. Every handshake, every conversation, every subtle smile was a calculated move. She was no longer just a guest in his life. She was a presence, an invisible architect quietly shifting the balance of power. Yet she remained untouchable. Her heart was not involved. Her emotions were contained. Every instinct, every thought, every action was for her mission alone. Vince Moretti had begun to notice the changes. His most trusted lieutenants questioned his orders more than before. Alliances shifted without explanation. And in every instance, He sensed a careful intelligence behind the movement. Someone was clever, precise and bold. Vince, dark, contemplative, almost whispering, "There is someone inside my world. Quiet, calculating, moves pieces I cannot see. And yet, I cannot find them." The irony was bitter. The person destabilizing his empire was standing beside him. He could not see her for what she truly was. She smiled at him. She laughed at his jokes. She complimented his judgment. She feigned admiration. And every gesture, every word, every pause was designed to uncover weaknesses he never knew existed. Vince, leaning in, voice low, dangerous, "You are unlike anyone I've met. Most people fear me, some worship me. But you intrigue me. Do you understand how dangerous that is?" Liana, cool, composed, hiding her intent behind a faint smile. "I understand danger. And I respect it. But fear does not help me survive." She was precise. She knew how to navigate his moods, his rules, his empire. Every compliment, every deference, every carefully timed question served her strategy. She gained trust without emotion. She gathered intelligence without revealing herself. She moved like a shadow, close enough to observe, far enough to remain untouchable. Vince, curious, dangerous, almost obsessive, "You notice things others miss. You understand my rules better than most of my own men. How do you do that?" Liana, steady, eyes clear, voice firm, observation. Strategy. "And I do not allow myself to be distracted." And there it was. Her strength, her control, her untouchable nature. He could feel her presence like a current under the surface. Impossible to ignore, impossible to categorize. He did not yet understand her true intentions, but he was drawn to her anyway. His obsession grew with every word, every gesture, every calculated move she made. Liana began to subtly manipulate his inner circle. She complimented one lieutenant's judgment, quietly sowed doubt in another's loyalty, and planted suggestions in conversations Vince would overhear without realizing their origin. Piece by piece, she weakened his power structure, testing the boundaries of his trust, and mapping the cracks she could exploit. Vince, muttering darkly, frustration mixing with fascination. "Someone is shaping my world, shifting it. But how? And why do I feel drawn to them even as they undermine me?" He could not place her. He could not predict her. He could not touch her. And that was precisely what made her dangerous. Her mind was sharper than any weapon. Her discipline tighter than any security protocol. And she had already begun to influence him. Not with love, not with weakness, but with intrigue, respect, and subtle, precise control. Vince, voice low, almost a growl, obsessed. "You are impossible. Every time I think I understand you, you move again. I cannot see the edges of your mind." Liana, calm, collected, masking the smallest hint of tension. "Perhaps it is not meant to be seen. Perhaps some things are only meant to be understood with patience." And Vince Moretti had never been patient. He was a man of rules, of fear, of exacting precision. Yet with her he discovered uncertainty. He discovered fascination. He discovered a sense of danger he could not control, the kind that made him watch, wait, and desire to uncover her entirely. Liana's mission continued flawlessly. She had not faltered. She had not lost control. She had not allowed herself to feel. And yet, every time Vince's dark, magnetic presence loomed near, every time he spoke with dangerous curiosity, she carefully adjusted, redirected, and controlled the situation. She was a master at the game. A ghost in his world. He did not yet know her heart was untouched. He did not yet know she had no intention of falling. Every step, every word, every smile was strategic. And yet he was falling. Into fascination, obsession, and a desire he could not name. Vince Moretti had begun to feel the walls of his empire shift beneath him. Nothing was overt. No betrayal, no violence, no open defiance. And yet, decisions were being questioned, loyalties subtly broken, and chaos began threading itself through the carefully constructed order of his world. He could sense a presence he could not name, a force moving unseen, shaping events from the shadows, and it was precise. Meticulous, calculated, Liana K. continued her mission flawlessly. Every word she spoke, every laugh she allowed, every subtle gesture was a calculated move. She gained trust without giving away allegiance. She gathered intelligence without leaving fingerprints. Every smile was a tool. Every compliment a strategy. Every shared moment with Vince was a test, a probe into his mind and his empire. Vince, leaning back, voice low, dangerous, simmering with obsession. Someone is playing my world like a game. Every ally, every order, every corner of this empire shifted without my permission. And yet, cannot find them, cannot see them, cannot touch them. I cannot stop thinking about them. Liana, calm, professional, voice steady, hiding the storm within. Sometimes the most dangerous moves are invisible, Mr. Moretti. The greatest power lies in subtlety, in patience. He should have felt anger. He should have felt fear. But he did not. Fascination, obsession, and curiosity had replaced caution. He began to watch her differently. Every glance she gave, every word she spoke, every calculated motion became magnetic. He did not yet know why, and he did not yet know that the one who could destroy him was standing beside him. Liana's intelligence and strategy were tested like never before. One of Vince's most trusted lieutenants, Marco, began acting suspiciously. He mismanaged deals, miscommunicated orders, and subtly questioned Vince's decisions. Liana knew she had to handle this carefully. One wrong move and Marco would realize he was being manipulated, or worse, she would be exposed. Liana, to herself, quiet, calculating, patience, observation, influence. He trusts me, yes. But I cannot slip. One misstep and everything ends. She orchestrated a subtle trap, a private conversation where Marco would unwittingly reveal his disloyalties. She complimented him, praised his judgment, planted the idea that Vince's attention would reward his loyalty. All while maintaining the facade of innocent admiration. He did not yet know her heart was untouchable. He did not yet know she had no emotional attachment, no personal investment. He only felt the pull of her mind, her presence, and the dangerous allure of someone who could see his world and navigate it perfectly without fear. Liana moved like a shadow in his empire, gradually gaining his trust while weakening the structure from within. But Vince was no ordinary man. He noticed anomalies, subtle shifts, tiny inconsistencies, and he began to fixate on her. Not as a threat, at least not consciously, but as an enigma, a puzzle he could not solve. Liana's mission demanded absolute precision. Every action was calculated, every word measured. She could not afford mistakes. Her strategy was flawless, her control perfect. And yet Vince's obsession grew. He began to shadow her movements without realizing it, to study her gestures, her pauses, her expressions. The tension in Vince's empire was palpable. Subtle chaos spread through the ranks, but he remained unaware that the source was the very woman he could not stop observing. Liana had created an invisible net. His men were compromised, his decisions questioned, and he had no clue. Yet he was enthralled. Liana had not faltered. She had not lost her composure. Her heart remained untouched. She had not wavered in her mission. Every smile, every calculated move, every carefully timed word was a weapon she wielded with precision. And Vince Moretti, the most dangerous man in the city, feared by all, unyielding, unrelenting, had no idea that the person destabilizing him, the person drawing him into obsession, the person shaping his empire from the shadows, was still untouchable, still mission-focused, still completely untangled from desire. The city trembled under Vince Moretti's rule, yet for the first time the king of darkness felt a storm he could not control. Small fissures had begun to appear in his empire, subtle, almost invisible, yet they gnawed at him like termites. Decisions mismanaged, alliances quietly shifting, whispers behind his back. And every anomaly pointed toward one impossible truth. Someone was inside. And that someone was Liana K. Liana moved like water through his empire, silent, careful, precise. Every interaction, every glance, every word served her mission. Yet her strategy demanded she remain untouchable, untouched by emotion. She could feel the tension in the room, the fear in his men, the unease in the air. Every move she made was a blade hidden beneath velvet. Vince had noticed changes. His most loyal men questioned his orders, subtly defied instructions, and Marco, his lieutenant, had begun acting suspiciously. Something was shifting, and it unnerved him more than any rival ever had. But the strange part, the part that unsettled him even more, was Liana. She remained flawless, precise, controlled. Calm, Vince, quiet, dangerous to himself, pacing. She moves my world without touching it. Yet I cannot touch her, cannot predict her. Nay, I cannot stop thinking about her. Every glance she gives, every word she speaks. It feels like a test. Nay, I do not know if I want to pass it or fail. Liana carefully orchestrated her next move. A key meeting with Vince's allies had to be subtly redirected to expose Marco's disloyalty. She complimented the loyal lieutenants, quietly sowed doubt in Marco's mind, and planted a suggestion that loyalty would be rewarded by Vince personally. She remained flawless, her calm demeanor a mask hiding the mental calculations racing beneath Vince. Watching her, obsession creeping into his voice, muttering, she smiles at them. She laughs. She says nothing, and yet she moves my empire like it is a game board. Nay, I cannot leave her alone. Cannot stop watching. She should fear me. She should run. But she does not. She watches me as carefully as I watch her. And I cannot figure her out. Vince's obsession was growing dangerously. Every interaction, every private word with her, seemed to draw him deeper. He wanted to uncover her secrets. He wanted to understand her mind. He wanted to control what he could not yet control. And yet, she remained untouchable, mission-focused, perfect. The tension in the room during the meeting was palpable. Men whispered quietly, eyes darting, fear hidden behind loyalty. Marco made a misstep, subtle, almost imperceptible, and Liana pounced. A carefully worded compliment, a shift in attention, a subtle suggestion. Marco's guilt and hesitation revealed him, and Vince caught the anomaly immediately. Vince, low, dangerous voice trembling with a mixture of frustration and fascination. Marco, what is going on here? This is unlike you. And yet, I feel like I am watching a shadow, a hand I cannot see. Someone influencing you. Nay, I cannot leave her alone. I cannot leave her. Liana's pulse remained calm. No emotion leaked. She had predicted this exact moment and moved with flawless precision. Her influence was undeniable, yet invisible. She had turned the tide in a single meeting without ever betraying her covert. Liana, to herself, controlled, unwavering, one move, one conversation, one word at the right time. That is all it takes. Keep him off balance. Keep the empire shifting. Never falter. Never fall. Vince's obsession deepened. He could sense her intelligence, her control, her untouchable nature. Every instinct screamed danger, yet fascination overpowered caution. He wanted to corner her, to expose her, to challenge her. And yet he knew, somewhere in the shadows of his mind, that doing so might destroy everything he controlled. And himself in the process. Liana had not faltered. She had not wavered. She had not allowed herself a single crack. Her mission remained flawless, precise, and deadly. Every smile, every subtle interaction, every calculated move was another step closer to the heart of Vince Moretti's world. And yet, despite her control, despite her discipline, the tension between them was electric. Every glance, every word, every subtle gesture carried weight. And emotion, though unacknowledged, hummed beneath the surface. Vince's obsession was no longer just curiosity. It was dangerous. And Liana's brilliance was being tested in ways she had never faced before. The tension in Vince Moretti's empire was a living thing now. Pulsing, unpredictable, fragile. One misstep could ignite chaos. Every alliance, every decision, every move could betray him. And yet he did not yet know who the architect of this subtle disruption was. Liana K, untouchable and precise, was everywhere at once. Observing, calculating, guiding. Every smile, every word, every gesture was a tool, and every tool brought her closer to the ultimate prize. Vince had begun to act on his obsession, subtly at first, almost instinctively. He lingered where she lingered. He asked questions he did not need to ask. He watched her like a predator circling a prey he could not catch. And with every observation, he felt a pulse he could not name. Danger, fascination, challenge, and something darker, something compelling. Liana noticed the intensity in his gaze. She knew the danger. He was not a man who could tolerate the unknown, yet he could not decipher her. She could feel the tension vibrating in the air, thick enough to choke a weaker person. But she remained untouchable. Every heartbeat, every breath, every subtle motion was hers to control. The inner circle was now at a breaking point. Marco's loyalty wavered. Whispers reached Vince, and subtle betrayals spread through the ranks. Liana had orchestrated it flawlessly. She had planted ideas, guided decisions, and tested reactions. And Vince, the most dangerous man in the city, was captivated by the mind behind it. Though he could not yet see her, a critical meeting had been arranged, a high-stakes negotiation between Vince's most trusted lieutenants. Liana carefully planted herself in the room. Her role perfectly calibrated. She guided the conversation, steered decisions, and exposed weaknesses, all without revealing herself. She was a ghost, invisible but undeniably present, and her influence was absolute. Vince could feel it. The shift, the subtle undercurrent of manipulation. He did not know who, what, or how, but he sensed a mind as sharp, as precise, as disciplined as his own. And that mind had invaded his empire, quietly, flawlessly, dangerously. Liana watched the subtle chaos unfold. Every reaction, every misstep, every hesitation was exactly what she had predicted. Her mission was flawless. And yet, the tension was suffocating. Vince's obsession was growing, and his unpredictability added danger she could not afford to underestimate. She remained untouchable. No emotion, no faltering, no trace of humanity beyond the role she played. Every laugh, every compliment, every small gesture toward Vince was designed to further her mission, to lower his defenses, to influence the men around him, to map every vulnerability. And Vince was walking a knife's edge. He was obsessed, fascinated, and increasingly dangerous. Not just to his men, not just to his empire, but to himself. He could feel the pull of Liana's mind, the perfection of her control, the power of her invisibility. And he was powerless to resist. Liana had not faltered. She had not wavered. She had not allowed herself to be touched, either emotionally or strategically. Her mission remained flawless. She remained untouchable, and yet the tension around her was thick with danger, obsession, and unspoken potential. The air in Vince Moretti's empire had grown taut, like a wire pulled to its breaking point. Every glance carried suspicion. Every silence vibrated with tension. And every heartbeat seemed to echo the presence of a ghost he could not name. Liana K moved through it all with surgical precision. Collected. Untouchable. She had become the invisible hand directing the chaos. Subtle, perfect, deadly. And yet the tension was growing, because Vince was no longer merely observing her. He was reacting, recklessly, dangerously, consumed by obsession. Liana knew the signs. His obsession was escalating. He was testing boundaries, taking risks he normally would never consider. Each moment was more dangerous than the last, not just for him, but for her mission. But she did not falter. Every step she took, every word she spoke, was a calculated move, designed to gain trust, lower defenses, and manipulate the empire without revealing her hand. A high-stakes meeting loomed. Vince had summoned his most loyal lieutenants to discuss a critical deal. Liana had prepared meticulously. Every word she would say, every reaction she would evoke, every glance she would give, was mapped in her mind. She would expose weak loyalty, test trust, and further destabilize the inner circle. All while remaining untouchable, unflinching. Vince arrived at the meeting, eyes sharp, pulse quickened. He could feel something shifting. Something invisible. Every instinct screamed danger. And yet, fascination, obsession, pulled him toward Liana with a force he could not resist. The meeting began. Liana orchestrated her moves flawlessly. She guided conversations, praised loyalty, subtly undermined Marco without giving herself away, and planted seeds of doubt in others. The empire began to unravel quietly, invisibly, with her as the invisible architect. Vince noticed the shifts immediately. Orders were ignored. Alliances subtly fractured. And all the while he could not locate the source. His obsession with Liana grew dangerously. He began watching her every word, every motion, every gesture. Liana observed his reactions, perfectly unreadable. She saw his obsession growing, noticed the tension threading through every move he made. And she exploited it. A subtle word here, a calculated pause there, a glance that drew his attention, and the cracks widened. Every weak link, every hesitation, every flawed loyalty became visible, and she remained untouchable, flawless, mission-focused. But the stakes were higher now than ever before. Vince's obsession was no longer subtle. It was dangerous. He tested boundaries, challenged authority, and risked exposing himself. And every move he made could endanger her mission. Liana had not faltered. She had not wavered. Her heart remained untouched. Every action, every glance, every word, every calculated move advanced her mission further. And yet, Vince's obsession was a wildfire, burning hotter with every passing moment. The tension was suffocating, electric, dangerous, and she navigated it flawlessly. The city was a quiet storm. Beneath the neon lights and shadowed alleyways, Vince Moretti's empire teetered. Subtle cracks had grown into small chasms. Decisions misaligned, alliances quietly unraveling, loyalty quietly questioned. And all the while, the man himself was spiraling, pulled deeper into obsession with someone he could not touch, could not name, could not control. Liana K moved through it like a ghost. Precise. Untouchable. Every word, every glance, every subtle gesture carefully measured to manipulate the empire and protect her mission. Vince's obsession was now dangerous. He tested boundaries, took reckless risks, challenged orders, and shadowed her movements. He lingered where she lingered, listened when she spoke to others, and felt an uncontrollable pull toward her, a force he could neither resist nor understand. Liana noticed the subtle shifts in his behavior. His obsession made him unpredictable. Every action he took carried danger, not just to his men, but potentially to her mission. She could not falter. She could not misstep. Every word, every glance, every interaction was a blade she wielded carefully. Invisibly, flawlessly, the high-level deal was set. Vince summoned his inner circle, men whose loyalty was questionable under the influence of subtle manipulations Liana had orchestrated. Tensions were high. One wrong word, one misstep, could erupt into violence. And Liana was in the middle of it. Every interaction a calculated maneuver. Marco, the lieutenant she had been subtly undermining, hesitated. He misread instructions, miscommunicated orders, and the tension in the room surged. Vince noticed immediately. His obsession with Liana added a volatile edge. He was equally frustrated and captivated. Liana acted swiftly, subtly, invisibly. A carefully worded compliment, a shift of attention, a strategic pause. Marco faltered, exposed his disloyalty, and the cracks widened. Vince's attention was on her the entire time, sensing the invisible hand guiding the chaos. But he could not pinpoint it. The tension became unbearable. Vince, consumed by obsession, began to act dangerously. Orders were shouted, loyalties questioned aloud, and the inner circle shifted uneasily. His fascination with Liana made him unpredictable. His obsession had become a weapon, and the battlefield was now both his empire and his mind. The tension had become a living thing. Vince Moretti's empire, once a well-oiled machine of fear and loyalty, now vibrated with subtle chaos. Trust had fractured like glass under pressure. Every man, every decision, every whisper carried the weight of uncertainty. Liana K walked through it like ice on a lake. Smooth, deliberate, untouchable. She had predicted the ripple, calculated the fall, and now watched as the storm built around her carefully orchestrated maneuvers. His frustration was almost palpable. Vince had always commanded obedience with fear, but this woman, she was not afraid. She did not falter. She did not betray hesitation. And it unnerved him in ways he could not contain. Liana's influence had grown quietly but decisively. Subtle suggestions, carefully timed words, and an almost imperceptible shift in her attention were destabilizing Vince's empire from within. Marco, her target, had begun to falter completely, second-guessing every decision, exposing cracks in the organization. And now Vince's patience began to fray. Vince, dangerous, voice low, controlling edge. Marco, answer me. Did you misstep? Or are you being manipulated? Because someone is threading through my men like a shadow, and I want to know who. Liana's pulse remained steady. She had prepared for this. Every move was a shield. Every glance a sword. She was untouchable, an invisible hand in Vince's empire, guiding, destabilizing, surviving. For the first time, Vince's obsession showed danger. His eyes followed her every movement, his mind racing, suspicion and fascination fusing into a dangerous cocktail. He was no longer just intrigued. He was tense, unpredictable, ready to strike or defend, yet completely drawn to her. Liana anticipated the risk. She moved one step ahead, diverting his attention just enough to protect herself and her mission. A gentle word here, a subtle gesture there, and the cracks widened in Marco's loyalty without revealing her hand. Liana had not wavered. She had not faltered. She had not allowed a single emotion to interfere with her mission. Her brilliance guided the chaos, her intelligence controlled the storm, and her discipline remained flawless. But Vince's obsession was growing hotter, more dangerous, unpredictable. The tension reached a breaking point. A single misstep, a single question asked aloud, a single hesitation could ignite a fire that would consume the empire. And both of them knew it, even if neither admitted it. Liana's composure never wavered. Every subtle movement, every carefully measured word, every strategic smile furthered her mission. She was untouchable, flawless, and mission-focused. She had predicted this escalation, and every action she took was designed to maintain control, influence the empire, and survive Vince's unpredictable obsession. And yet, the tension was almost tangible. The stakes were higher than ever. One misstep, one miscalculation, one misinterpreted gesture could ignite violence, destroy alliances, and potentially expose her. Every heartbeat, every glance, every interaction carried weight. And Vince, consumed by obsession, was an adult unpredictable force, drawn deeper into a fascination he could not resist. The night pressed down on the city like a heavy velvet curtain. Neon lights flickered in puddles on rain-slicked streets, and the distant hum of sirens threaded through the silence like a warning. Vince Moretti's empire was breathing, restless, unpredictable, alive. And within its walls, the tension had become almost unbearable, a quiet storm threatening to erupt at any moment. Every man in Vince's inner circle moved like a shadow, wary, uneasy, sensing the invisible shift in power, yet unable to pinpoint the source. The subtle chaos that Liana had orchestrated spread quietly but relentlessly, like smoke curling through a house, leaving no corner untouched. Liana K. walked through this storm with the precision of a predator and the patience of a chess master. Every word she would speak, every interaction she would engineer, every glance she allowed to linger was part of a larger game, one that no one but her could fully see. She was untouchable, not because she was invincible, but because she was disciplined, calculating, flawless, and yet, the danger was closer than ever. Vince's fascination had begun to take on a sharp edge. His obsession was no longer subtle. It had become volatile, unpredictable, dangerous. He moved through his empire like a caged beast, restless, tense, every nerve alert, every eye following her movements, every thought circling her presence like a knife at the throat of his own control. A misstep here, a hesitation there, and the empire could ignite in violence. Every man felt it. A silent pressure, the weight of a storm building, a tension that made even the strongest hesitate. And Liana thrived in it, using the pressure, shaping it, bending it to her will without ever revealing her hand. She observed the small cracks widening in the loyalty of Vince's men. The faint hesitation in Marco's gaze, the subtle tension in the shoulders of other lieutenants, the whispered doubts that passed through the room like currents of electricity. All pieces of the puzzle she had placed perfectly, invisibly, irreversibly. Vince felt it too, though he could not name it. Something was shifting beneath him, something precise, deliberate, unseen. It made his pulse quicken, his thoughts race, and yet it drew him closer, dangerously, irresistibly. He felt the invisible grip of a force he could not break, and it terrified and exhilarated him in equal measure. The storm outside mirrored the storm within. Raindrops pelted windows like frantic drumbeats, wind rattled shutters, and the city itself seemed to tremble in anticipation. And in the eye of this storm, Liana remained calm, composed, untouchable, a presence so controlled that it made chaos bow to her. Even as danger circled closer like a predator waiting to strike, Vince's obsession was no longer just fascination. It had become a volatile energy, a fire smoldering under his control, threatening to consume both him and everything around him. He could feel his pulse, sharp and jagged, his mind unable to turn from her even for a moment. And yet, she remained untouchable, distant, flawless, her mind sharper than any weapon. Her presence a blade hidden in silk. The night stretched on, thick with tension, danger, and unspoken possibilities. Every heartbeat was a countdown. Every glance between them carried weight heavier than any spoken word. The Empire itself held its breath. And in the center of it all, Liana K moved like a shadow, calculating, precise, untouchable, knowing that one wrong move, one lapse, could shatter everything, yet confident in the mastery of her control. The night had fallen deeper, heavier, suffocating. Shadows pooled in corners, stretched along the walls, and seemed to move on their own. Vince Moretti's empire pulsed with nervous energy. Every man, every movement, every whispered word carried the weight of uncertainty. And through it all, Liana K walked like a ghost, calm, precise, untouchable. But the calm was about to shatter. The fragile order she had maintained, the subtle manipulations that had bent an entire empire to her influence, were threatened by an unexpected event. A rival gang struck without warning, testing Vince's defenses, exploiting cracks she had subtly widened. Chaos erupted like a storm breaking over the city. Shouts, running footsteps, weapons drawn, tension slicing the air like glass. Liana's mind went to work instantly. She observed, calculated, predicted. Every movement mattered. Every second counted. Her heart did not race, not yet. She could not afford it. The mission demanded flawless control, and even amidst the pandemonium, she moved like water, invisible and untouchable. Vince's reaction was immediate and violent. The obsession that had simmered beneath the surface now roared to life. He barked orders, moved with terrifying precision, and yet, the presence of Liana in his vision added an edge of unpredictability. Every glance toward her carried intensity, fascination, distrust, danger. She had not faltered, and that only drew him closer, dangerously, as though her calmness was a challenge he could not resist. The rival gang's attack was a symphony of chaos. Shouts, gunfire, the clatter of overturned furniture, the smell of fear and blood in the air. Yet through it, Liana moved. Careful, deliberate, invisible, orchestrating without being seen, manipulating outcomes, diverting attention, controlling the smallest variables while Vince's attention oscillated between survival and an unnameable pull toward her. A lieutenant fell where she had predicted, misreading orders under the weight of panic. Vince's fury rose, violent, dangerous, a predator in full force. And yet, in that storm, he sought her eyes, her presence, as if she were both anchor and enigma. Every instinct screamed to strike, to confront, to dominate. And yet, the risk of exposing her secret kept him suspended between obsession and caution. Liana's mind raced. Strategy, timing, manipulation. All of it demanded perfection. One misstep, one hesitation, and the mission could crumble. One glance misread, one word misplaced, and Vince could unravel everything. And yet, even amidst the life-and-death chaos, she remained untouchable. The streets outside burned with tension. Rain hammered down in sheets, lightning illuminating the chaos in stark, white flashes. Men scrambled, shots rang out, alliances fractured under pressure, and Vince moved like a storm incarnate, protective, reactive, dangerous. And through it all, Liana's brilliance held the fragile threads together. She diverted Vince's men to safety, deflected Marco's missteps, guided decisions in real time, and created openings that would weaken the rival gang's position. All without him ever realizing the hand guiding them, and yet, for the first time, Liana felt a subtle stir beneath her discipline. The intensity of Vince's obsession, the raw danger around her, the chaos, and the life and death stakes brushed against her calm exterior. Her pulse remained controlled, but the awareness of the power he held, both over the room and unknowingly over her, was undeniable. Vince moved through the chaos with lethal precision, but every glance at her carried weight. Fascination, tension, obsession, and a dangerous curiosity burned in his eyes. He was untamed, unpredictable, a force that could destroy everything in a heartbeat. And she knew, if she faltered for even an instant, he could. The storm outside mirrored the storm within. Rain, thunder, chaos, a world trembling under invisible hands, both hers and his. And through it all, Liana K remained untouchable, flawless, a shadow in the eye of a hurricane. Her mission had never been more dangerous, the stakes never higher. Every heartbeat, every glance, every decision mattered. The night would not end quietly. The fire had been lit, and when the smoke cleared, the world would be changed forever. Vince's obsession, her brilliance, the chaos, the danger. It was a collision course, and there was no turning back. The city slept uneasily under a moonless sky, unaware of the storm raging within its shadows. Vince Moretti's empire throbbed like a living heartbeat, tense, restless, dangerous. Every man moved cautiously, every whisper carried weight, and the air itself seemed charged, vibrating with unspoken threat. Liana K moved through it all like a ghost, invisible yet undeniable, orchestrating chaos with the precision of a master. Every subtle gesture, every carefully measured pause, every glance was a thread weaving her influence through Vince's empire. She remained untouchable, mission-focused, flawless. Yet the danger surrounding her had never felt closer. Vince's obsession had shifted. No longer a quiet undercurrent, it had become a force that pressed against the edges of reality. He followed her movements with the intensity of a predator and the fascination of a man possessed. Every instinct screamed to dominate, to understand, to consume, yet he restrained himself, careful not to expose the truth, though the tension in his hands, the fire in his eyes, betrayed the storm within. And for the first time, Liana felt it. A subtle pressure against her composure, a weight she had never experienced before. His presence was a predator's pull, magnetic and dangerous, testing the limits of her discipline. An unexpected alert shattered the fragile rhythm of the night. A rival faction had infiltrated the perimeter, exploiting cracks Liana had created and forcing Vince into immediate, reckless action. The sound of shouts, the clatter of movement, and the sudden chaos snapped the city awake. Vince moved with terrifying precision, issuing commands with a force that brooked no hesitation. And yet, in the midst of the storm, his gaze found Liana. Every step he took carried an unspoken challenge, a dangerous curiosity, a pull that made the very air between them taut. She could feel it, a current brushing against her control, whispering possibilities she could not yet allow herself to consider. Liana's mind worked in perfect rhythm with the chaos. Every risk, every hesitation, every misstep from the men around her was calculated, manipulated, and guided. She moved invisibly, controlling outcomes without revealing her hand. And still, Vince's presence pressed against her in a way no strategy could mitigate. The subtle power he wielded, fascination, obsession, unpredictability, was a force she had not fully accounted for. She remained mission-focused, but the storm had shifted. Something in her chest stirred, a fleeting echo of awareness she could not name. Her pulse remained steady, her movements precise, yet the tension between them had become almost unbearable, a quiet war of wills beneath the surface of commands and chaos. The rival faction faltered under Vince's fury, but the damage had already begun. Loyalties wavered, cracks widened, and the inner circle's nerves frayed. And through it all, Liana's influence held the storm at bay. Yet she sensed Vince's eyes never left her. Every glance, every subtle nod, every command he gave carried double meaning. To the men, survival. To her, challenge, fascination, obsession. She had predicted chaos, but she had not predicted the weight of his presence, the way it pressed against her control. Each heartbeat, each measured breath, each step she took in the storm reminded her that she was no longer navigating only a mission. She was navigating a man who could unsettle empires and minds alike, and whose obsession was reaching a dangerously high voltage. The night stretched long, taut with tension. Rain hammered against windows. Lightning illuminated fleeting expressions of fear, courage, and fascination. And in the eye of the storm, Liana Kay remained untouchable, precise, flawless, yet subtly tested, measured against a man whose obsession was not just fascination but a force of gravity threatening to pull her off her carefully constructed path. The collision of control and obsession had begun. Liana's brilliance guided the chaos, but the magnetic pull of Vince's dangerous presence whispered that even the most disciplined minds could falter. And somewhere in the shadows of her own perfection, a quiet stir of doubt, awareness, and human vulnerability took root, the first cracks in her mission-focused armor. The night was electric, charged with a tension that could ignite at the smallest spark. Vince Moretti's empire, already fraying under invisible manipulation, now throbbed with a more personal intensity. Every glance, every movement, every decision carried the weight of unspoken obsessions and unacknowledged desire. Liana Kay moved through it all like a shadow, precise, mission-focused, untouchable. Yet for the first time, something shifted beneath her discipline. Her heart, which had once been entirely shielded by duty, now whispered in secret, a quiet, dangerous rhythm she could neither ignore nor fully understand. Vince's eyes found her constantly, not just in the chaos, but in quiet moments between commands and conversations. His fascination had grown, dangerous, consuming, but now, she noticed it with a strange warmth in her chest. Every word he spoke, every calculated glance, seemed to carry something unspoken, a pull she had never anticipated. And in that pull, Liana felt a flicker of something forbidden, something she had sworn would never exist. Love, or the faintest echo of it, began to thread through her thoughts, threading her mission with danger and desire. She found herself bending rules subtly, almost imperceptibly, keeping details from the cops. Certain tips, small but significant, were held back, veiled in layers of calculated reasoning. Every choice carried risk, but the risk of exposing Vince, of hurting him even unknowingly, now weighed more heavily than the risk of disobedience. Her mind danced on a knife's edge. One misstep, one hesitation, and everything could collapse. Yet the forbidden emotion that had begun to stir made the mission intoxicatingly complex. Love had crept into her discipline, and she could feel its dangerous power pressing against her resolve. Vince, unaware of the change within her, became bolder. His obsession, once measured and dangerous, now flirted with recklessness. He tested boundaries, lingered in moments longer than necessary, and moved as though drawn to her by a force he could neither explain nor resist. Liana watched him, the man who commanded fear, power, and loyalty, and in that moment, she realized the impossible. Her heart was no longer fully hers. Every smile he offered, every subtle word, every dangerous, magnetic presence chipped away at the barrier she had built around herself. The inner circle faltered. Rival factions smelled opportunity, and chaos threatened to erupt like fire in dry grass. Liana guided outcomes with flawless precision, yet her decisions now carried hidden motivations, imperceptible to everyone except herself. She protected Vince subtly, steered situations to his advantage, and withheld small truths from the authorities. A delicate deception layered atop a perfect strategy, and yet, in the quiet moments, the pause between chaos, the fleeting glance across the room, she felt her own heart racing in ways that had nothing to do with fear or duty. She saw Vince not as a target, not as an assignment, but as a man whose dangerous brilliance, sharp mind, and magnetic presence had claimed a corner of her heart she had never meant to surrender. The storm outside mirrored the storm within. Rain battered the streets, sirens screamed in the distance, and the city trembled under the weight of chaos. But inside Liana, an even more dangerous tempest raged. The collision of duty and desire, discipline and love, strategy and emotion. She had crossed the invisible line. The first cracks in her perfect discipline were no longer subtle whispers. They were dangerous pulses, signaling that the mission was no longer purely black and white. Vince's life, empire, and obsession were now intertwined with her own hidden emotions, and the consequences of that collision were unknowable. She was still untouchable, still brilliant, still controlling the chaos around her. But beneath the mask of precision, beneath the calm exterior, Liana Kay was no longer entirely the agent she had been. She was something more, something dangerously human, dangerously alive, and dangerously in love. The city never felt quieter, yet the air itself throbbed with electricity. Vince Moretti moved like a man possessed, every step, every glance, every decision now consumed by one unshakable thought: Liana Kay. His obsession had transcended fascination. It was no longer just a dangerous pull. It was a fire burning hotter than the empire itself, reckless, wild, and undeniable. Every word she spoke, every subtle movement, every calculated gesture pressed against him like a magnetic force he could neither resist nor fully control. He had stopped thinking of her as a mission, as a target, as a piece on his chessboard. She was the center of his world, the axis upon which his life now spun, and the obsession coursing through him was a storm of longing and danger. Liana, for the first time, felt the undeniable weight of his love, his obsession. Every subtle glance, every lingering attention, every moment he spared her in the midst of chaos carried a force that pressed against her discipline. She had anticipated danger, controlled chaos, and bent an empire without breaking a sweat. Yet the fire in Vince's eyes now threatened to fracture her control. Her heart, once fully shielded by duty, now betrayed her in small, imperceptible ways. She hesitated where she would not have before. She withheld more than just information from the authorities. She protected him, guided his moves, softened consequences, all in quiet rebellion against her mission. Every careful calculation was now layered with emotion, and every step forward felt like walking a razor's edge. The empire shuddered under the weight of invisible manipulations and escalating obsession. Rivals tested boundaries, alliances frayed, and chaos threatened to spill into bloodshed. Vince, maddened by desire and unrestrained fascination, moved with a dangerous recklessness, risking everything to keep Liana close, even unknowingly exposing himself to peril. Liana observed him, studied him, and for the first time, felt the gravity of her own vulnerability. The man she had once seen only as a target, a dangerous force, was now the one person whose presence made her heart race, whose eyes made her pulse stutter, whose very existence complicated every rule she had ever lived by, and yet, she remained flawless in the chaos. Even as her emotions threatened to fracture her discipline, she guided outcomes with invisible precision, manipulating the empire without revealing the depth of her feelings. Every subtle word, every strategic pause, every protective gesture was now tinged with something dangerously human. Care, attachment, and the beginnings of love she could not deny. Vince, in turn, felt the pull of her emotions, though he could not name it. Every interaction carried the tension of unspoken understanding, of desire wrapped in danger. He was maddened by the thought of losing her, by the thought that she might be just another ghost slipping through his fingers. And the obsession, once contained, now roared unchecked, threatening not just his empire but the fragile balance between love, loyalty, and survival. The storm outside mirrored the one within. Rain battered windows, lightning split the sky, and the city trembled beneath a night that seemed endless. Inside the walls of the empire, hearts collided with loyalty, danger entwined with desire, and chaos was harnessed by two forces. One brilliant, disciplined, untouchable, the other consumed, reckless, and desperately in love. Liana Kay and Vince Moretti stood at the intersection of obsession and devotion, strategy and passion. The stakes had never been higher. One wrong move, one reveal, one misstep could ignite the entire empire, expose secrets, and unravel both mission and heart. Yet, in that collision, a forbidden possibility whispered through the storm. Love had arrived, and it would change everything. The city had become a cage of fire and shadow. Every street corner, every alleyway, Every whispered conversation vibrated with tension. Vince Moretti's obsession was no longer subtle. It had consumed him. He moved through his empire like a force of nature, reckless, unpredictable, drawn irresistibly to Liana, willing to risk everything for a single glance, a single word, a single touch. Liana K's heart had surrendered to the unthinkable. Love had threaded its way into every decision, coloring her strategy, complicating her mission. She protected him now, manipulated events not just to control chaos but to shield him from threats only she foresaw. Her flawless discipline, once unshakable, now danced on a razor's edge, balancing desire against duty. Chaos erupted. Rival factions exploited every crack Liana had cultivated, alliances fractured, and bullets flew where whispers had once guided loyalty. Vince reacted with fury and brilliance, but even his near-superhuman control faltered under his obsession with her. He was drawn to her in the eye of the storm, reckless, magnetic, dangerously exposed. Liana navigated the chaos like a master conductor, her influence invisible yet absolute. She diverted threats, misdirected enemies, and steered outcomes without ever revealing herself. Yet the deeper her love grew, the harder it became to maintain the perfect mask of control. Every heartbeat carried risk. Every glance threatened to expose the delicate secret she had woven between her duty and desire. Vince's obsession collided violently with reality. One night, an attack came close enough to put Liana directly in harm's way. He moved with terrifying speed, violent precision, driven by fear, love, and a desire he could no longer contain. For the first time, Liana felt the raw weight of his emotions. The man she was falling for was capable of unleashing destruction to protect her. And in that moment, the impossible became clear. The Empire could survive only if they survived together. Danger, desire, and deception intertwined so tightly that separating them seemed unimaginable. Love had arrived fully, recklessly, and dangerously. Betrayal cut through the inner circle like a knife. Marco, manipulated and desperate, tried to leverage Vince's obsession, attempting to control outcomes. But Liana anticipated every move, turning danger into strategy. Each near catastrophe drew Vince and Liana closer, their trust and passion entangled in ways neither had intended but both could not deny. The storm outside mirrored the storm within. Rain lashed against windows. Thunder split the sky. The city trembled beneath the chaos of power, loyalty, and love. And through it all, Liana K and Vince Moretti stood together in the eye of the hurricane. One untouchable, brilliant, disciplined. The other obsessive, reckless, dangerously in love. The night had become a living thing, breathing with menace, power, and unpredictability. Vince Moretti's empire teetered on the edge of collapse. Rival gangs had converged. Inner betrayals shattered trust, and bullets now carved paths through streets that had once been his dominion. Chaos reigned, but at its center, two hearts burned brighter than any fire. Vince and Liana. Vince moved like a man possessed, reckless, untamed, and entirely consumed by Liana. Every decision, every action, every word was dictated by the fierce, magnetic pull of obsession. He had stopped thinking about control or empire. He thought only of her, only of keeping her alive, only of the impossibility of a life without her. Liana, equally consumed, walked the razor's edge of love and duty. Her brilliance guided the chaos, but now emotion threaded every strategy. She protected him at every turn, withheld critical information from the authorities, and manipulated outcomes with the dangerous precision of someone balancing mission and heart. The stakes were life itself, and the cost of failure was unthinkable. The betrayal that had been quietly building exploded. Marco, desperate and reckless, attempted to leverage Vince's obsession, pushing the empire to the brink. Liana anticipated every move, turning traps into advantages, disasters into lifelines, all while navigating the storm raging inside her, the forbidden, overwhelming love that had taken root in her heart. And then it happened, the final confrontation. Guns drawn, loyalties tested, enemies closing in from every direction. The air crackled with tension, every second stretched to infinity. Vince fought with fury, skill, and reckless devotion, defending Liana, protecting his empire, and moving like a force of nature. Liana, calm but trembling beneath the surface, made impossible choices. She guided him, shielded him, and for the first time allowed herself to fully acknowledge what had been growing inside her. Love, raw and unstoppable. She was no longer merely a strategist. She was a partner, a lover, and a force intertwined with the man she had once seen only as a target. The battle raged. Men fell. Betrayals were exposed. The Empire's foundations quaked under the storm of chaos, love, and obsession. And in the eye of that storm, Vince and Liana moved together, instinctively, seamlessly, a force the city itself could not withstand. A final decision loomed: save the Empire or save each other. Liana's heart pounded in her chest as she chose. She chose love. She chose him. The mission, the authority, the Empire, all secondary to the man she had come to love, the man who had come to love her with a dangerous, all-consuming intensity. The dust settled. Chaos gave way to silence. The Empire was scarred but intact, and Vince and Liana emerged. Bloodied, battered, but together. No one had predicted the bond they now shared. The power of love forged in fire, obsession, and danger. Vince's eyes, once cold and calculating, now burned with awe, relief, and a love so fierce it threatened to consume him. Liana, flawless in strategy and yet vulnerable in heart, allowed herself the impossible. Surrender to feeling, embrace the risk, and step into the future with him. The city beneath them was still dangerous, still alive with unseen threats, but for one moment the storm paused. And in that pause, two hearts beat as one, a forbidden love that had survived obsession, betrayal, chaos, and duty. A love that was dangerous, brilliant, and unforgettable. In the end, the mission had not defined her. The Empire had not defined him. It was their choices, their courage, and their love that wrote the final chapter. They were untouchable, not because of power or strategy, but because of something far rarer. The courage to love fiercely, dangerously, against all odds. And so, the storm ended, but its echo would linger forever. In hearts, in memory, in every whispered legend of the Mafia boss who fell for the undercover cop, and the woman who dared to love him back.